Good evening, everyone. Welcome to When I Was Your Age, the podcast where I talk about stuff that's common now, tell you what it was like back when I was growing up when I was your age. From the 70s through the early 90s, I'm going to talk about all that stuff. If you have requests of stuff that you would like me to cover, I know that I've gotten several requests already, and I apologize. I haven't exactly gotten to them because things have fallen behind because the amount of that was necessary for me to do research-wise, and I simply didn't have the time to do it. For the next couple of, probably 2 months or so, I'm going to see about that. So, if you do have something you would like me to cover, email address is right here on the screen for you, shujintribble@gmail.com. Be more than happy to see what I can cover for you. What I'm going to talk about tonight is something that is very weird. And I say that without any reservation whatsoever, because what this started off as has evolved to a huge extent in a way that I don't think anybody could have foreseen happening even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. What I'm going to be talking about tonight is photography. Now, you'll please forgive me. I'm going to be leaning back and forth a couple of times because I've got my props over here on the floor next to me. That's just the way it works. I'm sorry. Anyway, what I have in my hands here is a canister, and this is actually from probably a place that doesn't exist anymore, from a place in Brooklyn, New York. Now, back in the 50s at least, this was a movie film. This is a 8mm. And before you go ahead and start giving me all kinds of hell, yes, millimeter, metric. Now, you've probably seen stuff like this before in the old schools, and you'd have, the AV guys. Some of you are young enough at this point where there's no such thing as an AV person anymore, but 8mm film was the way that you did it. If you wanted to record what was going on, you got a movie camera and you shot film like this. And this would actually be inside of the camera, and it would be, I'll show you about the size in just a couple of moments. But when you used to go to the movie theaters, when they still had film projectors, it wasn't too much different from this. Now, obviously, as you can probably imagine, the film was larger in overall size. It was not 8mm because, let's face it, you blow up an 8mm film, it's going to look like hell on a huge screen. Plus, these 8mm did not have a soundtrack to them. But they were fairly ubiquitous. You could find them in pretty much any household in the 50s, and you would take it to a store, sometimes even a drugstore. In this case, that's exactly what it was. You could take it to a local drugstore. They would take the film, they would put it into their canister, and they would send it off to whomever to have it developed and sent back, and you'd pay for it, and thank you very much. Now, I do have the projector that goes along with this, but I decided not to show that one off. Maybe that'll be for another time. But if you want to record what was going on, this is the way that you did it. Now, obviously, like I said, from the 50s or so, that's the way it worked out. And of course, technology evolved quite a bit after that. For example, movie cameras. Now, this one goes back to the early 90s, the one that I have here. This is a JVC compact VHS recorder. And unfortunately, I don't know if this thing is workable any longer. It's got a couple of things with it physically that are just not quite working right. But this would be about the same size, give or take, as what the 8mm used to be like. But the difference, of course, is this is all electronic. And as you heard me say, yes, compact VHS. So, this, of course, is a compact VHS videotape. Not too different from VHS of yore. Now, the reason, of course, why it was called compact is because, well, as you can see, it's actually quite a bit smaller. The tape inside is the same size. It's still an analog magnetic tape right here. But you had a smaller cassette that you could put in. Now, there were a bunch of different ones that used to do that, and 8mm was also available, but that was also a magnetic strip. And there was also mini DV, which had little optical discs. It was literally a burning system that you would burn a little mini DVD. And of course, a little bit later, you had ones that were all digital. So it was recording everything straight to flash memory. Come back to that in a second. Let's go to still imagery first, just a moment. This is my pride and joy. What I have in front of me now is my Minolta SRT 101. This is a beast of a camera. Now, it may not look like much, and it may look quite a bit, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Old. And it is. However, these things had a lot of stuff going for them. These were, what's the word that I wanted to use on this one? These were constructed in the, well, going from the 60s through the 70s, some cases the early 80s. And I say constructed, not built, because these things were tough. These things were metal. They had a lot of stuff going for them. And, as you can probably imagine, because of the way that these things were at the time, it was a film camera. Now, I know some of you were just like, ooh, film, how retro. Well, film was the way to go, man. Film was not created by the Kodak company. Mr. Eastman did not create film. He just created a better way of utilizing. So the idea of using photography had been around for a while before even he got to it, but he made it very commercially viable. Now, in this case, like I said, this is my pride and joy, and I will not ever get rid of this, because even if it becomes incredibly difficult to get film developed, there are certain things that you can do with this that you simply can't do with the 21st century equivalent. Now, this one, this is my, and I use the term loosely, replacement camera. This is a Canon. This is the EOS 30D. Now, originally I'd wanted to get the 20 Astro. Unfortunately, the Astro was no longer in production, so I had to go for the next best. Since I was going out and doing a lot of photography for my friend's band, Roar 84, I wanted to do with a digital camera. I wanted to at least try. And since I had started with an SLR, I decided to stick with an SLR body, simply because I felt with a lot more control. Now, a digital camera, of course, has got all of the smarts to it, and I know that sounds like very trite, but let me explain quickly how much so. With a digital camera, you can choose where you want to focus. It has autofocus, and of course the pieces are smaller overall, and it depends as to what you want to do. And you've got a lot of filtering methods inside of it, and one of the most amazing pieces to me is that you can take a picture, a raw picture, of all of the light that's hitting the sensor inside. Now, the teaser that I put out for everybody was that this is something that Mr. Einstein helped accomplish. And now I've forgotten what the term stands for. The CCD, I believe, is the right acronym for it. System for actually receiving photons into the electronic system and recording it is something that came out of all of his equations and all of his work, relativity and all that stuff. So in a way, we have Mr. Einstein to thank for a lot of that. But the smarts that go into this, like I said, focusing, being able to determine a whole bunch of different things, the amount of light sensitivity, for one thing, is an amazing piece. And of course, being able to control the shutter speed and rate and timing, and there are just so many different things about it that you can adjust that on a manual camera like these simply is not even possible to do on the fly. This is arguably the most important piece of these old 35mm cameras. This plastic tube, this very little one, as you might be able to see, has some writing on it, and it says 400 at 24. Now, for those of you that are aware of this, that means that the film inside of this canister, which I've had for a long time, is an ISO of 400, 24 pictures on the roll. Now, for most of you, that's not going to make a hell of a lot of sense, but in this case, the number 400 is a relative measure of speed of how quickly the light coming in will get caught on the film, how receptive the film is to that light. And you can get speeds down to 100 or even 50, I've heard of, and then go up to 1600, 3200 speeds. And at that point, you get a lot more grainy imagery because the light gets scattered around and it's so sensitive that you'll get stuff that's blooming in some ways. And if you look at old photographs that have been blown up a lot, the beginning of Indiana Jones, for instance, if you look at it, even the Blu-ray edition at this point, to the best of my knowledge, you will see that kind of film grain. You'll have heard of it, and when you see it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm about to do something that I never thought that I would ever do with a roll of film, ever. So I'm going to do it just this once. This film, there it is 35 millimeters. And that measures across. And the mechanical piece that pulls it across in front of the lenses, a section will get exposed to the light in basically a square, and then that section gets moved aside so that the next section can get exposed, and one after the other, after the other, after the other, until you finally come to the end of the roll, which would be there. And it would stop pulling through. You would then use the machinery, or if you were lucky enough you had one that had the machinery already built in, it would wind it all back up again inside of the container, and you would take the container and you would bring it to a development lab. Now, in some cases, it might be photomat, which we'll talk about sometime later. But again, just like with the earlier 8mm movie, generally speaking, you could bring it almost anywhere, and they would send it off to be developed, and you get it back a week, 2 later, and you'd finally get to see what it was that you had recorded. Or, of course, if you were one of these hipsters, you could buy all the chemicals yourself and do it in a dark room, and works just like that. And the thing that is so amazing to me is that all of the information for the sensitivity can simply be dialed in to the computer on the backside of my digital camera. How fast the shutter release is, timing it to go along with the flash so that you could have 1/3200th of a second exposure, and your flash will work with it every time. Now, of course, with these older cameras, it was a lot trickier because everything is mechanical. So if you have something that isn't set up quite right, you try to set off a flash and you've got your shutter set to go off at a slightly different time without knowing it because there's something wrong with the spring inside, well, you won't know until 2 weeks later when you finally get your film developed. That's assuming that you fired off an entire roll. Of course, if you waited a while, who knows, it could be 3 months before you finally find out, oh crap, all those pictures from the wedding, they all got screwed up. I wish I'd known. Here's where it becomes fascinating to me. This is my daughter's Nintendo 3DS game system. Roughly $200. And this has on it these two little spots. You can see right here. Those are cameras. And as a matter of fact, on the inside, like a lot of netbook computers and tablets, it also has one camera facing the person using it too. So, like with it and a whole bunch of phones or mini computers, they can take pictures, and in some cases, they can even take movies. And this $200 toy has enough power to record photographs and movies in full color with sound, and in this case, in 3D. Now, it's not holographic by any stretch, but you do get the left eye, right eye separation because of the two, and you can see on it a 3D image, a 3D, well, it's faux 3D, but it's still got it. And it's a toy. That's not the most outrageous thing, though. Now, I did not have time enough to go looking it up. If I am able to find it, I will add a picture of what I'm about to talk about on the screen for you right here on YouTube right now. This is something that absolutely blows my mind. And like I said, it's something that I don't think anybody could have even expected even as much as 5 years ago. Photography, up to this point, had been a matter of literally, as the words are, writing with light, drawing with light, recording light. You use a bunch of lenses and you manipulate the light that's coming into the camera and you project it onto a recording surface and it records. And it didn't matter if it was film or an electronic sensor. It was projecting the information onto a surface and recording it. That is no longer bleeding edge by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, at this point, one could say, how quaint. Because there is now a methodology that's been proven and shown to work, where instead of recording the projected image on a surface, they are now recording not a surface, but a volume of space inside the body of whatever if you can call it a camera anymore. Literally recording the photons inside of a volume so that once you have that recorded information, you can then determine for yourself what would it look like if we changed the point of focus in this area. What if I changed the focal point, the depth of field? What if I changed my position a little bit? What if I rearranged the sensitivity? How much would this bloom out? How much more vivid would it be? What happened if I decided to change the focus to become out of focus, to focus in a different plane? And it's no longer what is it that the camera is seeing on the inside. It's now what's coming into it, and then figure it out afterwards. When you take a picture, you have to determine, when you take the picture, where is your focal point? Do you have a focal point? How much sensitivity are you going to be utilizing? How fast is the shutter going to be going? Are you going to have a slow shutter, a fast shutter? How quickly do you want it to go off if you want it to go multiple times? Now, you record the information that's inside of this box. And later, you decide where all that information is, all your parameters. And that absolutely blew my mind. I have no idea how anybody could even come up with this concept. Never mind, make it happen. But this is where technology has taken us. Photography is no longer, here is a representation of life. Now, you're literally taking a chunk of that life with you, putting it into a bunch of zeros and ones, and then saying afterwards, let me show you what this might look like if. This is what I cut my teeth on, this film, as did many of us, as did my mother. And now, we're looking at technology that nobody could have possibly seen. And it's going to become commonplace. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in even 5 years. And who only knows after what that next step is going to be. I'd like to say that I know. But like I said, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this was it. And I have no idea where this is going to take us. But like with many other things, I can't wait to see where the ride goes. As always, everyone, thank you for listening in, and I hope it's been entertaining and informative for you. If you have some questions, of course, that you'd like me to answer, I do read anything and everything that comes through, mainly because I don't have too many people commenting yet. But please, by all means, feel free. If you have questions you'd like to email over to me, shujintribble@gmail.com. I'd be more than happy to cover topics. I'm going to see about getting the ones that you people have sent in already, now that I have time to go ahead and actually do, research. But of course, by all means, let me know what you think. Rate, subscribe, suggest to people, share. I hope that you guys enjoy it, and most of all, I hope it's worthwhile for you. As always, until the next time, I wish you the peace I no longer have. I wish you the strength that I've learned. I wish you well. One of these days, this thing will actually kick off the way it's supposed to. That's better. Until next time, everyone, take very good care of yourselves. Good night.
Before you can say boo, you'll be my age too.